Okay, this session is billed as a dialogue between Vice Admiral Wisecup and me about various issues, but what we want to do is have the dialogue not just between the two of us, but with all of you about issues that are current, issues that are on your mind and cause some concern and respect to ethical behavior. We're focused obviously on the Navy, but I'm sure it applies to other services as well. And to kind of get it started, I wanted to refer to what came out here recently that was called the 2014 Navy Retention Study. This was a study that was not Navy sanctioned, but was put together by a group of officers and some civilians. In fact, there was even faculty support from one of our faculty members here at the college to take a look, survey the Navy, and come to some findings and ultimately some recommendations for Navy leadership to look at some issues that this study revealed. And there's a couple of things I just wanted to kind of kick things off with, because I think from Admiral Weisecup's viewpoint when he was the IG, he saw evidence of some of these things and has some, I'm sure, some comments about the implications for us as a Navy and moving forward, particularly in respect to leader development. The first was a waning desire for senior leadership positions was found in the study. 49.4% of responding sailors do not want their boss's job. Senior operational command leadership positions are less desirable because of increasing risk aversion. That was 68.7%. High administrative burden, that was 56.4%. And in some cases, a pay inversion, where commanding officers are paid up to 10% less than mid-career officers that they lead. So over to you, Admiral Wisecup. What's your take on that subject?
Well, for starters, okay, I'll give you my personal opinions on things, okay? I'm retired now, and I work over at Sims Hall. But the point of this is, you know, if it was easy, anybody could do it, all right? And it's the challenge here, okay, is that in the current climate with you know, reductions in budgets and things like that, as you look at the threats and the type of things that always have inspired people to go into the military, and you heard a little bit of it from our previous speaker. You know, the research, I think, is in that it's not all about the pay. It's not all about the pay. My first department heads told me that in 1978. They said, look, if you're in this to make $1 million, you're in the wrong place. And I actually thought that was pretty good advice, you know, looking back on it now, many years ago. And so those kind of things, you know, and you heard it also from our previous speakers, it's about doing meaningful work and making a difference. It's about making a difference. And so it does bother me. And of course, you know, in the study that you're referring to, you know, I've read it, and I've read, you know, Guy Snodgrass's paper. We've all read it. I hope you've read it. If you haven't, you should. But at the same time, you know, I don't know the sample size and all that. I'm not trying to refute it. I'm just trying to say there's more that we need to tear into here, and that's one of the things I will tell you that the Strategic Studies Group has been tasked to look at in our tasking this year is talent management. Who we attract, how we train people, how we retain people in an economy that, you know, seems to be starting to rebound, and also how you do all this, okay? And that's one of the things that we're trying to figure out how to, I mean, it's a big elephant, okay? And so we're trying to figure out what parts we can attack and what parts we can look at and make recommendations to the CNO on. You know, I talked to every command leadership school, now called NLEC, every command leadership school class, okay? and in terms of wanting to take command and aspire to command. And it bothers me. The numbers in the survey bother me. But I will also tell you, you have to be careful of who's making that comment, right? The Marines especially, I mean, the Marine, if you don't know this, and ask any Marine, the Marine force structure is very different than the Navy force structure, okay? I don't know, it's almost 40%, help me Marines, about 40% of the Marines are less than, 22 or 3 years old, I mean, very young guys, and they're not expected to go on to be commandant. They're going to do several years in the Marines, and then they're going to go do something else. And so their pyramid is a lot narrower, okay, in terms of what they're trying to do with young officers, okay. They may not aspire to command, but the point is different models, okay, for different services. And so as we attack the personnel problem, the talent management problem, and you heard it alluded to in our previous speaker, in terms of salaries and those kinds of things and flexibility, sure. But at the same time, it does go to, what it is we're trying to do and the meaning of what we do. And I would tell you, I think that historically, a couple of things, the desire for people to go and to command a ship in the United States Navy, there have always been people who are willing to go do that, and it's one of those kind of jobs where, and I think somebody said it earlier, where there are just certain things that you can only do in the military, and it is definitely a strength, okay, to be able to in terms of professional job satisfaction, to be able to take our people from this country to go and do the nation's business halfway around the world and be trusted by the American people to do that, okay, and to bring them back safely. So I guess my point is, I think there's more work to be done on this. Leadership is certainly aware of these issues, okay, and in fact, for example, the perception of reduced discretionary authority of COs because of the communications and things like that. That's one of those issues, okay, that we're certainly going to zero in on. But the point is, the idea that that the administrative requirements are trumping the operational requirements, it's an issue. Aware of it, but when you actually ask people in a room, okay, well, what should we quit doing? Nobody comes up with good recommendations, okay? Well, no, because everybody sees the need for certain things we do. The point is that all these programs are stovepiped, and they're all seen as very important, but if you invert the pyramid, okay, and you put yourself in the position of the commanding officer, the prioritization has become hard and much harder than it used to be, because frankly it used to be able to not do things, and that's harder now because everything's tied to a computer program, and you can check at a central registry to say, oh, you didn't do this or you didn't do that. But the good COs have always just decided what's important and what's not, and they'll decide that this isn't as important as the other things we're doing.
The one aspect of this that seems to come up all the time, and that's this issue of perception of risk aversion. It's the highest percentage noted in that portion of the study, and I was interested in your thoughts about the perception that the Navy is risk averse. Because I've heard from junior officers up through command, even to major command, prospective commanding officers that would say, yes, that's the fact, and I have heard several senior officers say, what, you kidding me? That's crazy. We're not risk averse. We make risky decisions every day. So is there an issue here, or is this perception, and where do you think it's coming from?
No, I mean, I think that, everybody's got their own perception of and their own story about micromanagement and things like that. I can tell you, my experience as a commander, within the last few years was that I got good bit of autonomy to do what I needed to do. And if I knew if I had a problem, I could always call my commander, okay, and as a flag officer, to be able to say, hey, we have a real problem here that I need support on, okay? Now, I think most of the time there is a perception that, you have people, with what everybody likes to call the 8,000-mile screwdriver, okay, telling you what to do. I will tell you, good commanders normally can figure out what their commander's intent is, okay, and be able to work within it. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I would say it's a lot of the perception is just that. It's a perception, and it's not a perception that that is to be disregarded, because it is a perception. But that said, if you get down to cases, and maybe you all have cases that you know of, okay, that I don't. I always felt as a commander I had a good bit of autonomy to do what I needed to do. This goes to the tell me what you want done, and I've always been a proponent of mission orders. Tell me what you want done, not how to do it, because once you get into the how, then that is now you are getting into commander's business.
The second part of this survey that I think is that you can certainly make some comments on, especially from your role as IG, was this notion of widespread distrust of senior leadership. So 37.2% regard senior leadership as, quote, marginal or, quote, poor. A polarity state that they do not trust senior leaders. 51.3% don't believe senior leaders care what they think, and 50.1% of sailors do not believe senior leaders hold themselves accountable. Is there an issue of trust out there on the waterfront?
Well, trust is central to what we do, okay? And in the end, when it comes to operations, and I think this is part of the problem with a Navy that hasn't seen combat action at sea in many years, okay? Now, granted, we fly over Afghanistan and we do things, but you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, Lady Gulf type, slugging it out at sea. It's been a while since that happened, and, as you think quickly to when that might have been, there have been, in the late 80s, Ernest Will convoys. We reflagged the Kuwaiti tankers. That led into Praying Mantis, which is against the Iranians, which, literally missiles were flying, guns were, shooting lead. But the point is this, the trust, if people talk about trust, are we talking about administrative things? Are we talking about, what kind of things? And everybody can have their own stories about when they didn't feel like they were supported. But the question is, what kind of issues are we talking about? Yeah, you're right. As IG, part of my function was, as the IG, is to investigate the senior officers, all right? And we did the 3 stars and below flag officers, and, we were constantly investigating, cases. And the thing is, though, despite the number of cases we investigated, the amount of cases that were substantiated rarely varied above 10%. And I will tell you, you let those cases go where they go. And there are some cases that were pretty high visibility and some cases that weren't. I'm going to talk about individual cases. But the point is, in general, of the times that there were complaints that we looked at, the number of times that we actually, found things was not very much in terms of the number of cases we looked at. And we looked at a lot of cases. That's my point. So in the end, the question of whether or not senior leadership can be trusted and all that, I guess what I would say is, in any big organization, you're probably going to have issues of this nature. What would be interesting to know is, what was the sense 15 or 20 years ago? In other words, historically, I wonder what the sense was of, trust. Now, the fact of the matter is today with the communications you have available, we were able, as a young officer many years ago, you could actually say on the radio, "You're garbled in transmission. I didn't hear what you said." Okay, whether it was true or not. Okay, you can't do that today. Okay, you can't. Well, you can say I missed that email, but it's just not quite the same. Okay, so I guess the issue among senior commanders is how far down are you gonna stick your screwdriver if you have something going on. And I can tell you, I was an operational commander. We did takedown operations and things like that out at sea. And, it's funny too, because in the early days of chat, okay, the commanders all said, well, we're not going to use chat to actually do operations. Well, that didn't take long, okay, and we were doing operations over chat. But the point is, it's one thing for them to be able to tell you their code words, hey, we're doing this and we're doing that, so you're informed and you know that everything's proceeding logically. It's another thing to reach in with the 8,000-mile screwdriver and do something about it. So, I think the communications has led to some of this perception just because you can do it. My last deployment in the Navy was 2008. Okay, we had all the stuff you got now, and I really never felt like I was under the. Clearly you're under the Klieg lights. Okay, you're going to go to command of a United States Navy ship or a squadron or a task group or something like that. Hey, welcome to the bigs. Okay, you're in the Klieg lights, and everything you do could wind up, with some event. Okay, but the point is, the survey goes to widespread distrust, and among the sample of the people who answered this survey, that's a case. Navy's a pretty big outfit, okay? Anybody know how many people there are in the Navy? There's 600,000 people, half military, half civilian. But it's a pretty big outfit, okay? We're bigger than, I don't know how big Google is. Anybody know? I don't know, but we're not the biggest, is my point. Okay, we're not the biggest of all of the big outfits, and I'm sure I guess my underlying point is there probably have always been issues of this kind. The question is, whether we can have the sense that this is really as widespread as the survey makes it sound. I don't know the answer to that, but that's certainly something that we'll be looking at.
I think before we open it up to the floor, the last question I think I would ask is on the subject of the Navy makes it very public when we have detachments for cause. Is that what we should be doing? Are there unintended consequences from that maybe mitigate against that? And what's your take on?
Well, people may disagree with me, but the fact that we do this, okay, is one of the reasons why and I'll tell you, there was Admiral Roughhead when he was CNO actually talked to the Washington Post about this. I think it was in 2010, because of this business. And you can look, the two IGs before me, and then the IG who preceded me, Andy Wins, they actually studied the relief for cause issue. Okay. I posted those studies on the IG website, so you can read them on the Naval IG website. Anybody read them? There are two. Yeah, Martin, I'm sure you've read them, okay? But the point is they studied from 2000 to 2005 and from 2005 to 2010. So we get 10 years of reliefs over this, okay? And the annual average is about 20 to 22, 23 people. Anybody know how many commanding officers are in the U.S. Navy? There are 1,500, okay? There are 1,500 commanding officers in the U.S. Navy. Now, obviously, ships, squadron, submarines, okay, that number is smaller. But the point is, the reliefs also include, certain commanding officers who you wouldn't, be even considered to be in the line because staff officers also can have command, okay? But my point is this, the numbers are such that this seems to be about the number, okay, and it varies, around 20. And I will tell you, the interesting thing, from my perspective, since I was the IG really had very little to do with this. This were mostly command reliefs for cause. And you say, well, what were the majority of the reliefs? Well, most of it was personal misbehavior. Okay, and that's what the studies will tell you. Okay, if you read both of those studies, they're all over the map. Okay, why these things happen, but the lion's share was for personal misconduct, as opposed to incompetence, shooting the wrong target, those kinds of things. Okay, but so there's 10 years worth of studies that you can read for yourself and see what you think. But I guess in the end, and I'm not downplaying the significance of those reliefs. I mean, clearly it's an issue. That's why we studied it. Okay, was to see. But at the same time, I think talking about that, get back to my point about Admiral Roughhead's article. He said we set a very high standard in the Navy, and we're not going to apologize for that. Okay, we're not going to apologize for high standard. If it was an easy job, anybody could do it. My point is that the exemplary conduct statute, okay, is in law, all right, and it comes from, anybody know what I'm talking about? The exemplary conduct statute comes from the Articles of War, okay, from the Royal Navy that we took and put into our Navy regs and traditions and things like that, and it essentially says that persons who exceed to command in the U.S. Navy repose special trust and confidence, and that your conduct is expected to be of an exemplary nature. And believe me, people find out very quickly once they're in command that people in the United States, generally citizens, are very interested in what happens to commanding officers. And so, in the end, the intent is not to embarrass people, when these kind of things happen, but nor is embarrassment one of the categories of FOIA withholding. Okay, Freedom of Information Act, there's a law in this country that says that people can ask for this information. And believe me, that was one of the things that I did as an Inspector General, was we reviewed FOIA requests from people on investigations, and there's very, very little that you can actually withhold from people when it's asked under the law. So point is, in most controversial cases, it's going to come out anyway, all right? So we take the tack, okay, and have for some years now, that we just tell it, because it's going to get investigated, by the press and things like that, because as a commanding officer in the U.S. Navy, you are a public figure. Like it or not, you're a public figure, and people are interested in what you're doing.
Okay, so I hope that's generated some thoughts or questions from you all, and I'd like to open it up to the floor.